Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. Okay, I am here today with a very quick look at Super Fantasy Night of the Badly Dead. So if you're not familiar with this game and you just take a look at what is pictured here, and maybe the name of the game and the art and perhaps even the back of the box here, you might think that this is kind of a kid's game, maybe a My First Dungeon Crawl type experience, or something that is decidedly not, triple A, as they say in video games. This isn't a game from a heavy hitter designer or something that has been kickstarted with millions and millions of dollars to spend on components and all of that kind of stuff. And in some of those areas, you might be right. Component-wise, the game barely passes the muster, especially for, I would say, for a lot of like modern board gamers. It comes with some pretty limited standees. They're not even cut out or anything. They do have a front and back facing, which is nice. It comes with some very primitive wooden terrain that you can use to make up your maps. The map tiles themselves are pretty thin and somewhat pedestrian in the art. And the same can be said for some of the character art and pages. It is rather silly. We have an electric guitar wielding bard here, pretty thin cardboard, and then all of the material, like the upgrade materials for your characters, are all on these kind of like weird just cardboard pieces with not a lot of art, some somewhat questionable text. So you get a large stack here of magical items. At least these have some art on them. Sorry, I wasn't on camera there. And some of them are pretty interesting. And you get a whole bunch of little tiny little chits there that are thin and small. So you might walk into a store or somebody's house or at a convention and see this game set up and not think twice about it. And that would be a mistake. Because while the game doesn't look phenomenal, it doesn't have great table presence, it looks and feels somewhat limited and dated. All of that stacked together hides the fact that this is actually a pretty great little tactical skirmish style dungeon crawl game. And while it looks like a kiddie game, while it looks like something that might be a My First Dungeon Crawl experience, it is absolutely not. This game can be incredibly brutal if you don't take the time to really plan out your movements and your attacks and the way you're going to defend and how you're going to tackle each of the 6 included missions in the mission book, which goes from mission 1, and they get progressively harder and kind of a campaign until you get to mission 6. So it is limited in the amount of missions that it comes with, but I believe that they are highly replayable just because of how tactical the game is. You also don't get a ton of enemy variety, but you do get enough to have some fun. You get a sheet of some of your grunts here, your little minions, and then some of the stronger minions, and then you get to your bosses. So you have 4 different bosses, and then each one of these can be flipped over to the red side here, which makes the enemies stronger. But to offset the fact that you don't have a lot of enemies, what you do have are these variable enemy powers that you can randomly draw from to add any of these tiles to the card, to the enemy. So you can add 1 or 2, and you can make the enemies much more difficult and have a lot of variety in the way that you're going to have to approach the enemies and in the way the enemies are going to react and interact with you as the player. So this is a co-op game. It is the players playing as heroes, and they are going against the game. And basically you're trying to kill the boss on the level, or sometimes do some other things. In this first mission here, you start over here and you have to work your way through the graveyard. All of the missions in this particular set take place in a graveyard, and you have to make your way into this house here and pass a cunning check to try to determine what the badly dead, these skeleton dudes, what, you know, you're trying to determine what their plan is in the story. Each mission also has an epic way of winning. You get just some bragging rights if you do the epic version, and in that case you have to go over to this, there's like a board game in here, one of these I think that is like the board game or something, and you have to go, and there has to be 2 enemies in here, and you have to pass a test with those 2 enemies in this room, to thematically, like you're playing a board game against them. So that's kind of cool. There is a tongue-in-cheek nature to this game. It is humorous, and it is a lot of fun. This game is really cool. Unfortunately, the quality of the components and the somewhat pedestrian look of the game aren't the only things wrong with it. The rulebook is problematic. So I believe this game was originally an Italian game, and the translation leaves a lot to be desired. There are lots of spelling mistakes, such as cemetery, but it's spelled right there. And just some very oddly phrased rules, and there's some ambiguities that you kind of have to puzzle out. But for the most part, the game is pretty straightforward, and it is just a very tense tactical experience on the map, and a lot of that has to do with the dice system. This game utilizes a unique dice system that I don't think I've ever played a dungeon crawl adventure game that uses a system like this. So I'm just going to kind of move all this stuff around so we can get the dice tray in here. So when it is your turn, let's take a look at a character here. Let's take a look at this goth chick here, Kayla Skull Kicker. She has a story on the back of her page. Each of the characters has a little story on the back. But the characters here, we have a track for experience. Okay, we have where they can upgrade their equipment. You can have 2 hands worth of equipment. You can hold a piece of armor. You can keep some small items like potions and books and tomes. You can keep those in your backpack. And then on the side here, we have each character has 3 or so, or actually 3 exactly, special abilities. So if you look at Kayla's here, so her special abilities are, she has a storm of bolts, a tactical stunt, and go for broke. And then she also has some stats here on the side, or on the bottom here. So strength, cunning, aim, magic, speed, and defense. And so when you are playing, each time it is your turn as one of the heroes, you get a pool of 6 custom D6, and you're going to roll those. This counts as 1 success. This counts as 2 success, and this is a wild success. And the value of the wild depends on the strength of your stats stat and which stat you are using to accomplish the action that you want to take. So for instance, let's say I was here and I wanted to move to this tombstone here, this nice wooden tombstone without a single shred of evidence, or not evidence, of detail. That is, I wasn't going to say a single pixel of detail. I was just watching a whole bunch of videos on video games, so video games on the mind. But so let's say she wanted to move here. Let's say she was here and she wanted to move to that tombstone to damage it because she could find some treasure in there. So I would take my 6 dice. This is my pool of dice for my turn. And I would determine, let's see, how many d6 do I want to use to move. I can move 1 space per sword, or if I roll a star, I can move, her speed is 2, so that would give me a 2. So I want to move here, so I need to move at least 2. So if I roll 1 d6, there's a chance I could only move 1, but there's a really good chance I can move 2. So I'm going to spend my first d6. I'll just roll my first action to move. I will just roll 1 d6. All right, and I rolled a star, so that means I get to use her speed of 2. So I can move her up to there to 2 to get to that tombstone. So now to break a tombstone, to break it open, normally you're going to break the tombstones. The tombstones are going to be actually placed on the maps to on these grave sites. And throughout the game, you're going to roll this fate die. And depending on the symbol, more enemies are going to spawn on those spots. So you want to break the tombstones to have them fall over and cover up those spawn points. So we'll pretend like she had moved over here to try to break that tombstone. So to break the tombstone, you have to get a test of 6 strength. And that'll tell you here on the back of the actions, smashing a tombstone. It's a strength 6 plus test. Now rolling 6 successes is pretty difficult in this game. So I would want to roll 4d6. And I'm looking for a strength of 6. Oh, wow, so I nailed it. So there's 6 and 7. So I would smash that tombstone. I would knock it over on top of that spot there. By doing that, I would randomly draw a small treasure, and I would add that to my backpack. And then for my turn, I have 1 d6 left. Now, every time you roll a star, you also get to power up one of your special abilities. And as you move your power up token up the track, whenever it reaches that star symbol, well, you can use that special ability in addition to any of the other actions you can take with your dice. However, there's also a thing you can do that you can do a charge up. So you can just roll a d6 and you can charge up an ability depending on how many pips you roll. Again, if you roll a star, you can charge up by your magic value. So it's really cool, this D6 pool system and the way that the wilds interact with your character's stats can create for some very interesting turns. Another thing that you have to think about doing is defending. So your characters are very squishy in this game. She only has 3 hit points and she has an armor value of 0. With an armor value of 0, if she is ever attacked by any enemy, the enemy doesn't even have to roll to attack. If you have an armor value of 0, you automatically take 1 point of damage from an enemy. And that is brutal because you can get surrounded very quickly in this game. So one thing you have to think about is on your turn, you can say, okay, so let's say this was my turn and I had started my turn like this there, surrounded by 2 badly dead, 2 skeleton warriors. And, I only had 1 hit point left. So on my turn, I'm going to take my my dice pool here, my 66, and I'm going to use those to defend with. So I would not take a turn this turn. I would devote all 6 of those dice to defending on the next enemy turn. And I would take 6 of these little shield tokens, and I would add those to my shield spot here, my defense spot on my character sheet. And now when it's the enemy's turn and they activate and they get to attack, well, then I can use those to defend, and then we have a roll off. So you really need to think about how you're going to spend the dice in your pool to move, to attack, to destroy objects, to search, or to defend on the enemy's turns. Now, sometimes you can find armor, and what armor does in this game is it allows you to take a certain number of defense tokens at the end of your turn. So if she was wearing this turtle shell armor at the end of her turn, she always would get 3 tokens to use to defend with. And at the end of the monster's turn, at the end of a whole round, all of these tokens are discarded, so you can't keep them from turn to turn. And then as you do damage to enemies and destroy enemies, you're going to be leveling up. And every time you hit a level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, you get to upgrade one of your abilities. And each ability can be upgraded twice. So her original ability, Go for Broke, here, it says you can't use this action if you've already attacked during this turn. You can make an attack with a +4. If the difference between your attack and the target's defense is 6 or more, you deal an extra damage. So you would deal 2 damage, because attacks pretty much always deal 1 damage in this game unless you have some kind of bonus. Then that can be upgraded up to this 3rd level here. And then each of her other abilities, her tactical stunt, which allows her to evade out of the danger zones of enemies, kind of like an area of death, a zone of death, kind of like in Advanced Hero Quest or in Done, which we recently took a look at. And then she has this Storm of Bolts, which allows her to do better ranged attacks. And so a lot of the characters will have a ranged attack. Now, the range in this game is also interesting. So this is at a range of 2. It's not up to 2 away, it's at exactly 2 away. And that is in a radius. So when you are playing this game, if you were here, all the squares adjacent to you would be a range of 1, range of 2, range of 3, and so on. So with her crossbow, she can only target things that are at a range of 2. So if you want to do ranged attacks, you can't be right up next to them. Some weapons have a range of 3, so you have to really think about your positioning. Another thing you have to think about in your positioning, I'm just going to set up the board here. Let's set it up like this. So let's say my 2 characters were here, and there was Badly Dead here and here. So at the end, when it's your hero's turn, you're going to be moving around. And when it's the enemy's turn, the enemies that activate, you check their activation areas. Each tile is an area. And only the enemies on orthogonally adjacent areas, tiles, activate. So you need to be really careful about in which area you are going to end your turn. And if you split up the party, see, so here, if we ended this hero phase in this configuration, this enemy is in an adjacent area, so he would activate. This enemy is in this adjacent area, so he would activate. These 2 are not adjacent orthogonally, so these 2 would not activate. If I ended my hero phase in this configuration, every enemy on the board would activate. So that's another very interesting thing about this game. It's a very easy tactical mechanism, but it's one that I don't really see in other dungeon crawls that focus on this kind of like tactical combat. So a lot of abilities that you have allow you to push enemies 1 square away. So you can push them diagonal. And so you could push them off to tiles that are no longer adjacent. So at the end of your hero phase, those enemies do not get a chance to activate. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this game. It is not in any way story driven. You are not going to be drawing, you know, event cards or encounter cards that will introduce NPCs or any kind of thing like that. There are some non-combat tests where you have to use your cunning to maybe open a door, a trapped door, or something like that. Another thing is this game is timed, so depending on how many heroes you are playing with, you have a timer. You start at turn 1, and this will be used to, this little red skull will be used to determine the last round. And every time a hero dies, the only penalty is you get 1 fewer game turns to win the scenario. So that is kind of how the game is balanced. I was playing with 2 heroes this last time, and I really think that this game is probably best played solo with 3 heroes. That seems to be a real sweet spot, and it is pretty easy to do. There's nothing that carries over from hero's turn to hero's turn. Every hero has a definitive like turn sequence, and so you're not having to keep track of all kinds of complex things. So it is an easy game to play solo with multiple heroes. With 2 heroes, I found that it was pretty difficult to manage all of the enemies appearing. You do get extra turns, so you can die more with 2 heroes, but I think 3 heroes really is the sweet spot for this game. But yeah, you know what? I very highly recommend this game. You can probably pick it up for like a song and a dance these days. There are 2 volumes. I'm not going to be looking at the second volume right now. We will do another video for it because it does have a few additional rules or changed rules, enough things that I don't mind keeping both. I do wish they both fit in the same box, but because of the odd shaped equipment tokens and these large cards, they're not cards, they're cardboard chits. The game does take up quite a bit of space in its small box. It would be nice if you could fit everything from both games in one box, but maybe that's possible, but I don't think it is. Maybe with some very careful, Tetris style piece manipulation, you could get everything in one box. But yeah, so if you can overlook some of the rules issues, if you can overlook, or if the look of the game, the somewhat kiddie, comical nature, if you can overlook that, and it doesn't bother me at all. I actually kind of dig the way this game looks. I like cartoony style games. I have no problem with them. I know some people intensely dislike them though. And if you can get over just like the lack of quality table presence that this game has, if you dig through all of that, you will find a game that is super challenging. You will find a game that has some very interesting tactical decisions to make, and a game that has a unique dice system that I just don't see very often in very many games like this, and I wish I could see it more because I really like it. So yeah, that was a quick look at Super Fantasy Night of the Badly Dead. So all right guys, we'll take it easy and we will talk to you later. Bye bye.